in Steve Lukather's book where Steve auditioned for my dad when he was real young, maybe 19 or so. And one of the things he was asked to play was the opening lick to San Bernardino, which is not necessarily the hardest thing to play, but it's a little quirky. So if you aren't paying attention, you could play it wrong. And I think he was nervous, so he wasn't playing it correctly, and then he wasn't remembering it. So my dad, as he tells it in the book, made an example of him and said, "You have no retention," and basically excused him from the audition. So he didn't feel so good about what had happened there, but he used that as a learning experience to make sure that he was as prepared as he possibly could be for any and all other musical encounters, so that that kind of situation wouldn't happen again. In the middle 70s, my dad's band was a coveted seat to get. So there used to be people that would try to audition just so that they could have it on their resume. And so they might try to get in there and then not stay for very long. So that's a tricky place for my dad, because it's so difficult to rehearse a band and then you have to replace somebody. Now the balance of everything's off. And so he ran into that a few times with different kinds of people. But there was one particular time where I saw this drummer audition, and he was really just an imbecile. This guy pretended that he could read music, but clearly he couldn't. So the music was put in front of him, the Black Page, which is a very difficult piece of music of my dad's. And it's a drum solo originally. So he was supposed to be able to sight read this drum solo. And so it's put in front of him, and he sits down and the cymbals are in front of him, and he starts tickling the cymbals and doing this kind of thing like this. And he's thinking that that's impressive, or that somehow that would be viewed as him playing the music that's in front of him. So after about 25 seconds of this, my dad was just looking at him like, "What are you doing?" And he said, "Oh, okay, yeah, I'll play it." So he adjusts the paper and he looks at it again, and then he starts doing the same thing. And my dad was like, "You're out of here." It was just, who would do that? Yeah. So on the record, I don't remember how many people are credited in a way that is erroneous.
I wrote a couple down, so we'll hit a few.
Yeah. So in the liner notes, I just thought if anybody was reading along, it would be funny for them to imagine certain people doing certain things. So having Mickey Rooney play bass on a song seemed like a pretty funny, preposterous idea. He didn't, in fact, play on the song, but I gave him credit for it anyway. You know, so stuff like that happened in the liner notes on the record. I think Clint Eastwood's credited as doing something somewhere in there.
On this one, though, actually, so the female voice of the woman was Michael J. Fox he put on there?
Yeah, well, that clearly wasn't the case.
Well, clearly the time period was really funny. You actually have Josh down for drums, but you also have John Stamos. Now, he does play drums. He does. Yeah. And he was special. Now, is it a joke because he was the drummer for the Beach Boys at the time?
I think it was just, these kinds of random things to make somebody think, is it possible? Could that
was possible back then, though.
Yeah, so it walks the fine line. But no, he did not play drums on it. It was just Josh. But it's the kind of thing where if somebody was really taking all those things seriously, it could have given them that much more enjoyment for the record. Or it could have given them pause to think, I don't know, what's going on here? So it was just kind of a fun way to be a little goofy with some of the credits.
Oh, I was the
credit, even if they didn't have anything to do with it.
Well, and I read it before. I was like, I saw Mickey Rooney. I'm like, that can't be it. But then when I saw John Stamos, I'm thinking back at the time, like 91. I think he did the Beach Boys, like Kokomo, and he was playing drums, and he was pretty big. Uncle Jesse doing a lot of stuff. I'm like, that could have happened. And they told you then there's the Zappa factor where you're like, you got to throw everything in with a grain of salt there. Yeah.
It could have happened. So maybe one day I will get him to play drums on something.
But after harmonies, this was funny. You put down MC Hammer and Paula Abdul. which is hilarious.
Yeah.
But now
Well, if you listen really hard, you might be able to pick them out.
I could hear his pants shuffling for MC Hammer,
Yeah.
but that's about it. But you did put background vocals. You put your brother, and then you put and Nuno, of course. But then you put Clint Eastwood. But there's a little more different. There's something different about the Clint Eastwood you're going to tell me about.
Right. Well, Clint Eastwood, he did not sing on that one, but it would have been hilarious if he was in
Stuck
there.
out,
If
you know,
you
with
just
his voice.
imagine like, Nuno and me and Clint Eastwood, and we all got one headphone on and we're just, singing along to this version of this Beatles tune. But the thing about Clint Eastwood is I used to play a fair amount of golf. And I once was playing in a golf tournament, which happened to be on the island of Lanai in Hawaii, like with the smaller island. And at the hotel where the golf course was, there was this thing that was set up for guests of the hotel to have an evening to hear a discussion, a roundtable discussion with a few of the guests that were playing in this golf tournament. And so it ended up being me and Clint Eastwood and a guy who was a huge movie producer at the time named David Wolper. David Wolper made he did so many things. He did Roots, and he produced the Olympics in 1984 or somewhere thereabouts. I guess that was the time when it was. But he did one of my favorite movies of all time, which was Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. The original version.
Mm-hmm.
So
I got
it. So the thing about him was, I was playing. The golf tournament was kind of like a team event. You would play with certain people, and you'd. So I was on David Wolper's team, but the thing about David was he liked that I could hit the ball far, because when you work as a team, it's like, okay, you play from the best ball. So you drive like whoever hit the furthest or best shot, everybody then gets to hit the next shot from there. So he liked to be on the team with me because I was hitting the ball far and it was in the fairway. So he didn't know how to say my name for the first several days of like knowing him. So he would say, I want to get that guy Tweezers on my team. He called me Tweezers. So I think I even ended up being called Tweezers by him that night at that roundtable discussion with Clint Eastwood. So it was just this really strange experience. But here I am, have nothing to do. These guys are all big time movie guys, tons of movie stories. And the majority of everybody in that room would have known whatever they had been up to and have no clue what I was up to at all, or couldn't care less. But anyway, I did get called upon to answer a few questions, and I did have a little back and forth conversation with both of those guys, but it was definitely a surreal moment for me to be part of a panel discussion with, I mean, if you saw it on paper, it just looks ridiculous. David
I'm
Wolper,
trying to visualize it.
and Dweezil Zappa. Yeah. And then it was just so incongruous because we were there because of golf, So another thing, and maybe it would have made more sense for leisurely things for people in the movie industry, but at that time it wasn't really that well known as part of a rock and roll tradition.